Let's talk about sex. Not everybody likes sex. Virtually everybody likes sex. There are people who have sexual dysfunction because of experiences they had as a child or even as an adult. There's asexuality, where the person has zero desire to have sex. This is not a dysfunction. Although psychology might consider it a disorder because it's out of order. It's not what's expected of the average person. But it's not to say that that person is broken. If you are asexual, that's part of who you are. Just like if you are a straight person who, well, obviously likes the opposite sex. That's who you are. But there's this idea, you could say it's Americanized, you could say it's somewhat global, but obviously not definitely global. Because, well, not everybody thinks this way. But sex is personal and should be censored. That permitting people to see the act, to hear the act, to experience it without actually experiencing it is wrong, unethical, bad, against God, what have you. There are many reasons for this. Interestingly enough, just recently on Reddit, and unfortunately I don't have the quote with me, somebody had mentioned that we use sex to sell other products, but we lock up people or fine them if they sell sex itself. And somebody had mentioned that it's because it's commodified in that way. See, our culture has it to where we utilize sex as the reward for all the consumerist things that we do. Let's disregard the idea that capitalism is bad, because I don't think so. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's not amazing, and it's not horrifying. It's a process of how we trade. Socialism, same kind of thing. We just do it differently. That's all. So, politics and economics aside, with regards to that, sex is the reward for buying the right house, for buying the right car, for wearing the right clothes, for acting the right way. You are rewarded with sex. But when you sell sex, you minimize everything else that uses sex as the reward mechanism. So if you could just go out and buy sex, well, why would you buy my $50,000 car that I'm trying to sell you? Why would you buy this $200,000, $300,000, $1 million house that I'm trying to sell you? Why would you buy my clothes? Why would you stand up straight and speak with authority when you could just go outside and pay for sex? Now, I can see the value in that concept, in the commodification, or rather the consumerism that rewards you with sex, because that's kind of how we do things. That's kind of how sex works, in a sense. Sex is kind of a reward, but it's not the only reward. And that's something that I feel, at least in America, has lost a bit of sight when it comes to, sex is not just a reward. Sex is a part of life. It's necessary for life to continue. And why do we do anything? We do it because we must continue existing. You might ask, what's the meaning of life? Well, the meaning of life is to procreate and continue on. If you want to simplify it down to the least desirable concept, that takes the concept of sex and just drains it of all emotional value. And it just says, oh, well, it's just so we can reproduce. Well, yeah, that's the point of it. but we derive value from sex. We derive pleasure from sex so that we can continue doing it. Think about it in evolutionary terms. If we didn't derive value from sex, it's likely we wouldn't have sex. And if that were a trait that were passed on when we did in fact have sex, it's possible that the majority of the population may end up doing that and thus dwindle to virtually nothing. But if, let's say, there is a mutation that allows that person to derive pleasure from sex, then that individual is going to want to have sex more. And it's possible that they're likely, if they were the only person to ever have pleasure from sex, then they're probably going to find different partners because the other people aren't really going to want to do it that much more frequently. And let's just say if it happened to be a male, then they could have sex with many different people, impregnate as many women as they possibly can, and then pass that sex pleasure gene on. And then the next generation of children who have that, male or female, can then start to derive pleasure from sex and do it more frequently and have those urges and have that desire and begin to, in a way, centralize their life around sex. Because that means to them, and obviously we're talking about it in a very rudimentary, if you will, caveman-esque format, they'll want to just do that. And they'll seek out people who want to, or at the very least, people who are okay with it right now, or simply people who just want to have a child and are willing to go through the process just for the sake of it. And then, if you can't find enough people to provide you with that pleasure that you were born with this pleasure derived from this act, then you may seek out ways to continue having this pleasure without other people, i.e., masturbation. And there's nothing wrong with masturbation either. You're told at a young age that you shouldn't do this, but by who? By people who believe it. It doesn't even matter the reasons. I don't care. I don't care what their reasoning is. It could be religious. It could just be an upbringing. It could be because a parent had sexual dysfunction and they don't derive pleasure from sex, and thus they don't want their children to derive sex or sexual pleasure. And so they suppress it. But if that child was born with that gene or that mutation or whatever it may be called, then that child is going to find pleasure in sex anyway. Until, of course, someone like myself, who derives pleasure from sex but doesn't really seek it that much, because I grew up in a household where sex was taboo, where the thought of it, the visualization of it, was negative. And so at any given point, to be candid about this with my own personal experience, when I was younger, I was about 13 years old, I stole some pornos from a store with a friend of mine. And I was in my room and I was looking through them, and obviously I was deriving sexual pleasure from them, but I wasn't, I had my pants down and, jerking it or nothing. It was just, I was flipping through it and I was enjoying what I was seeing. Well, my dad walked in on me and, I hid him under the covers, and obviously that was I wasn't good at hiding things. I never really was as a child. Not physically anyways. I was really good with the lying thing. Even though my parents constantly caught me in it, I learned how to get better at it. And so when my dad found out, he's, basically like, what are you hiding kind of thing? And he takes the covers and he's like, and I'm trying to help him and I'm trying to pull the books with them away from where, so I'm trying to be as subversive as possible, and it just didn't work. And he saw the pornos, and he rolled one up and he beat the crap out of me with it. It's not a pleasant experience to get hit with a magazine. And it wasn't, a swat. It was punishment. It was, instead of a belt or a paddle, it was the magazine. And he tore that thing up in the process of just wailing on me. And it wasn't even like swat me on the ass kind of thing. It was just hit you in ways that could be hit. And, that could easily have been one of the main reasons why I have so many hang-ups when it comes to sex. It could even be one of the reasons why I still, to this day, question my sexuality. Even though I never look up gay porn for any reason. I have no desire to see it. When I see it, I look away from it because it's not attractive to me. I don't have a problem seeing a man, whether he's undressed or partially dressed or whatever, but I don't derive sexual gratification from men. And yet, to this day, I still question my own sexuality. I still question whether or not I'm lying to myself. Is that fair? I don't think so. I think that what is fair is talking to your children about sex, letting them understand why they're doing this. But you yourself have to be secure in it. You have to be okay with this idea that your child is looking at sex and is curious about it and will probably be feeling things. And if you're not okay with that, you're just going to perpetuate it. And then you're going to be okay with that. You're going to be okay with this idea that children should not be exposed to sexuality. Yet, at some point, there will be. And you're going to be ignorant of that fact. You're going to hide from it. You're going to say, not my child. And what are you going to do? You're not going to give them a healthy view or a healthy experience that is sex, which should be, because it is a biological function of humanity. Men and women exist because their parents had sex. And they were born through the biological process. And yet, there are people out there who want to turn it into something bad. I don't get it. I mean, I do, but I don't. I would think that there would be people who would be smart enough to figure this shit out, to be able to figure out why you have these hangups. Now, obviously, I'm doing that for myself. I'm trying to do this. And maybe it's because there are people out there who just won't. And I can see why too. It's a strange sort of dichotomy in my brain where I understand yet I don't understand. And I guess I just have to focus more on the parts that I do understand. But I guess that lack of understanding is that lack of empathy I possess as well. We all experience a lack of empathy to some degree. But when it comes to sex, when it comes to teaching your children or just simply having an experience, obviously, as so many people have said before, you must love yourself first. But sometimes you need help. And sometimes it either comes from a professional or it comes from a lover. I, right now, have as much sexual desire as I have. I don't seek sexual partners because I know I'm not ready. I'm not mentally ready for that. If it happens and we start to communicate and I'm able to open up a little bit more, fantastic. It hasn't really happened much though. Hopefully, your sex life is far more interesting.